Tonight, a system of special schooling and segregation.
He has been out of education all his life.
What is striking about the statistics reveal is that the percentage of disabled people is highest among those who have no education.
The process of inclusive education is subject to a whole host of socio-political and economic changes. With Ofsted identifying this considerable inequality of provision in the SEN system is demonstrably no longer fit for purpose. So what is the key to successful special education in the UK, and how can inclusion in Africa impact that?
Children who learn together learn to live together.
Tonight, Tioni Jug investigates if the people of South Africa can improve inclusion in England today. With the cost of maintaining special education schools in the UK at £4.1 billion per year, which is 13% of all education spending, Tonight examines if segregating our children really is the answer. Good evening and welcome to the Tonight programme. Tonight we uncover the truth about how 77 million children worldwide are not in school, and how a staggering 33% of those children are disabled. Most of these children live in developing countries, yet despite their hardest trials and tribulations, their insight may impact on inclusion in England today. Tonight, Tioni Jug investigates if the people of South Africa could improve inclusion in England today. With the cost of maintaining special education schools in the UK at £4.1 billion per year, which is 13% of all education spending, Tonight examines if segregating our children really is the answer. The education system in both South Africa and the UK lives in the past. One family who welcomes integration as opposed to segregation is the Adendorf family. Mrs. Adendorf tells us that the only hope of education for her disabled son is through integration in a mainstream school in South Africa.
My son Abdi is 7 and has cerebral palsy. He has been out of education all his life. In South Africa, people with disabilities, especially children, tend to be ignored by our education system. Our family earns so little money and the special schools are so far away that we cannot take Abdi there, and we have no money for transport. I am disheartened because all the people can see is disability. Many families view disability as a curse or gone case, but I see it as my blessing.
Attitudinal barriers remain the most prevalent obstacles to equal access to education for all children. It is estimated that as little as 2% of children with disabilities in developing countries attend school. Why are so many children missing out on this fundamental right? Children's rights activist Jerison Lansdowne explained. The denial of this fundamental right has its roots in the apartheid system. The philosophy of apartheid was to segregate and divide. Whilst race determined social class, it also entrenched worlds of difference between different social groups in southern Africa. Black disabled children commonly experience difficulties of social exclusion, marginalisation associated with the impairment as being compounded by the oppression experienced as a result of their race. This long tale of underachievement and failure brought upon by apartheid has continued into the 21st century, weakening social groups and determining the life chances of millions of young people. This has resulted in the striking numbers of children out of education that we see before us today. Educational psychologist Ruth Jones tells us more. Inclusion demands challenges at the macro, micro and micro level. The process of inclusive education is subject to a whole host of social, political and economic changes, including money, social deprivation, effectiveness of legislation and policy and expertise. However, one familiar challenge is that of segregation, something that is widespread in South Africa and England today. Segregation can be regarded as a multi-level concept. Its interrelated values shape cultures and societies as a whole. Sociologists believe that the macro level of society is the root of all problems. At the macro level of society lies the legislation that ultimately affects the way our education system is formed. Our education system in both South Africa and the UK lives in the past, where legislation has deemed that children with special educational needs should be segregated from the rest of society. And until this internal structure is rearranged to meet the needs of society, it will continue to cause problems in the meso and micro levels. The legislation at the macro level of society has brought upon negative attitudes of disabled people both in England and South Africa, and affected the way our education system is run.
Traditional African attitudes towards children with a disability, like Abdi, deemed that parents violated traditional standards and values. It scared people and meant disabled people had to be isolated and neglected. Children with disabilities are often hidden. The answer for both groups of parents was to change our goal from inclusion in education to inclusive education.
This was an all too familiar occurrence in England in the 20th century, where, similar to Africa, people with disabilities were hidden, often in institutions. But why has this negative impact continued in the 21st century? Piaget tells us more. Theory is that as children grow up, their thinking and learning is based on the experiences they had as they got older. Children learn their social norms and values from their experiences, and so are likely to conceive the negative attitudes they have experienced towards disabled people. This continues in a vicious circle. And so it is evident that the macro level of legislation influenced the micro level of social norms and values, which has dictated the way our education system is run today. While children continue to be segregated in special schools because of old legislation and negative attitudes towards people with disabilities. But what implications does segregation create in our society today? My name is Charlotte, and I have cerebral palsy. My experience of governmental systems has made me feel socially isolated and oppressed because I am denied opportunities, restricted of choice, and have lack of control over the support systems in my life. I am training to be a teacher and have the same mental capacities as the students, yet I was restricted in choosing my specialism, in where I live, and what schools I am placed in, because of society's restrictions. It's like they control my life. Through the social model, disability is understood as an equal relationship within society, in which the needs of people with impairments are given little or no consideration, even in education. But what implications does segregation create in our society today?
The answer for both groups of parents was to change our goal from inclusion in education to inclusive education.
This consensus is growing throughout the world. All children have the right to be educated together. In the last 6 years, a number of major international statements have supported this notion, affirming the principle of inclusive education and the importance of working towards schools for all.
The United Nations Conventions on the Rights of the Child 1989, the UN Standard Rules on the Equalisation of Opportunities for Persons with Disabilities 1993, and UNESCO's Salamanca Statement and Framework for Action are all powerful tools in the struggle to abolish segregated education, which denies children with disabilities the right to be part of mainstream schooling. So what does this mean for our families? All education policies, according to Salamanca's accompanying framework for action, should stipulate that disabled children attend the neighbourhood school. The policies require governments to develop an inclusive education system for all children. Whilst this presents both a challenge, it also presents an opportunity to shift the changing attitudes towards disability and to develop a new social model at thinking towards disability. By solving problems at the macro level, it opens new opportunities to tackle on the meso and micro levels, such as negative attitudes towards people with disabilities and segregation. The new frameworks cover many aspects of education at different stages of people's lives. Its priority is to encourage children with disabilities to attend schools at all levels. It asserts the best way to do this is to focus on the best interests of the child. It also addresses the education needs of the large number of adults with disabilities who are uneducated and recognises the importance of lifelong learning. It is a step forward to enable us to create an inclusive society. These goals are similarly set out in the South African White Paper. So what are the long-term benefits for inclusion, and how can we implement them in our classroom? For students, inclusion highlights the open learning potential of each student, which can be progressively discovered and stimulated. Students are able to learn from their peers, as in the social learning theory. For schools, a new response to the reforming curriculum and implementation of cross-cutting pedagogy. For teachers' expertise, the importance of specialised knowledge and the active participation of the students in the learning process. For the curriculum model, a common curriculum for all students. Particularly are 1. To include all pupils. 2. Communication is central to teaching. 3. Manage the classroom. 4. Plan innovative lessons. 5. Plan for individual help. 6. Use assistive aids. 7. Manage behaviour. And 8. Work together. You can accomplish what these policies set out to do.